The International Criminal Court and war crimes trial against Israel is getting tons of coverage there, but we don't talk about it at all in the West.
Interesting.
So it's all over, British and, Middle Eastern and African news, but we don't really talk about it here.
So South Africa brought this to an international court saying Israel is guilty of war crimes. They brought this case. I remember hearing that it seems like their case is pretty good. Is that true?
Well, I'm not going to tell you what I think here, just going on what the public officials said, right? I'm not familiar enough with like the details of the case or what the standard is for this sort of thing. It is a pretty broad standard for like genocide and things like that in the international court. It's like everything from like taking people's kids away and educating them, which is, I could see as a form of cultural genocide.
Sure, absolutely.
Especially as the Westerners, we really get kind of that, you're sensitive to that. To like mass killings, right? So everyone thinks of Hotel Rwanda as an example of that, or the Holocaust, of course. So those sorts of scenarios, are they doing that? Well, you do have declarations from Israeli officials, no offense, Bennett, of them saying things like, we don't care about accuracy, we care about damage. Right, things like that are going to be used against Israel in this court. And
they don't care about being accurate with who they're targeting. They care about inflicting maximum possible damage.
That's what they said on live television.
Wow.
Right, like and there have been there's lots of circumstantial evidence. It's difficult because you have to. I don't know what standard of evidence you have to prove it at, but it is a huge drama that's playing across the Middle East, and so like this is once again. It's about the air war more so than about the physical war. It's about like people's impression, like the mental space is 10 times the size of everything else in this space.
It's the info war or propaganda war.
Info war is a great word.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
I don't know.
Some weird came up with that.
He has the documents.
In the United States, the Senate killed a measure to scrutinize Israel's human rights record in holding back aid under that scrutiny. 11 senators voted in favor of it. This is Bernie Sanders' led resolution to force, Congress to address Israel's record on this question. So as you're looking at it, you're saying, "Wow, this is like," and it's interesting because the right wing is not paying attention to any of this, right? He's not seeing this on Fox. He's not seeing it anywhere. You can find it in Intercept. You can find a couple like news reporters talking about it, but it's largely like avoiding, I think, the corporate press overall. They're just not talking about it. So,
do you have an impression as to why that is?
Support Israel, right? And
just overall,
it doesn't make Israel look good. Even talking about it now, I have a hard time like trying to frame it in a way that's like trying to be neutral towards Israel here. I'm not saying I know that they are committing these things. I have my impressions, my opinions and stuff like that, but just trying to say it neutrally as like an exercise and trying to present it fairly from that side. And I don't know how I could frame it in a more generous fact that there's non-trivial amount of evidence, a non-trivial amount of accusations that seem grounded in reality, and it isn't all just made up, right? Like it's there. And then when you look at the numbers, sheer amount of people killed, sheer amount of kids killed, reporters, doctors, hospitals bombed, things like that. And there might be good reasons for all of that, Israel supporters, but it's a real problem when you look at the optics, not to mention the international regime here. Now, why would South Africa be the ones to bring this? It's complicated.
Well, also another BRICS nation.
Yeah, also another BRICS nation. And then there's, obviously the internal domestic politics on the left. The leftists are all, the Biden administration has all these staffers quitting because of his Israel policy. He has a huge problem with young people right now in his electoral politics with this. Bernie Sanders comes out and gets smashed by his base for the last, I don't know how many months it's been, since October. And he's this week came out with some kind of red meat for him to try to get them to do a little bit on it, on this thing, because he's been supportive of Israel otherwise, in response to October 7th.
So just so I'm clear, you're saying that Biden has been having trouble with young people leaving his campaign because they aren't doing enough to support the Palestinians.
Not just his campaign, his official staff in the White House.
Yeah.
Like
Wow.
you got people who made it to the freaking White House, which is like the top of like, if you're a political hack, like you're on the hill, and then you got these people who are like turning down that job and walking away because of the Israel policy. It's that big of a deal to that demographic of American political electorate on the left. And it's kind of crazy to me that talk radio is not talking about it more, or just like the right isn't, because it's an interesting moment.
Yeah, you'd think they would capitalize on any amount of political turmoil within the White House or the Democratic Party.
It's gotten a little bit, but I'm just surprised at how little. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's gotten nearly as big as it should have. So there is that. There's a whole bunch of, it's crazy because we kind of divert away from foreign policy a little bit. We come back and it's like all these things have developed and moved. But just holding up, just even and this demonstrates just how unpopular it is. Only 11 senators out of 100, voted for this very reasonable thing from their perspective, right? Which is we shouldn't give them aid if they're committing a war crime.
We should at least have a report.
Yeah,
that's what the resolution is.
It's a lot like the Ukraine spending. It was just like, hey, maybe we should just know where the money's going, and people are like, nah, we can't know that. We don't have time for that, and they just voted down, right?
I have to imagine that there are America First senators in the group of 89 that voted against it.
I'm not sure. I was just scanning through the article, and I even saw Mike Lee was against it.
Because if that's the case,
it's a complicated relationship with the right wing and Israel.
Well, and if that's the case,
there's a lot of donor dollars that exist there.
Yep.
And if that's the case, then how do you reconcile the idea that we shouldn't have insight and clarity into where American taxpayer dollars are going with regard to Israel and
because there's a lot
the
of donor
America First
dollars
agenda
right there.
Yeah.
That's the dirty little truth of it is the
Yes.
Israel lobby is very powerful.
But what I'm trying
on
to bring
both sides of the aisle.
And what I'm trying to bring light to for people that might be listening is that you need, if you care about America First, if that is your rallying cry, if you're a part of that cohort, great. Hold your representatives accountable to being honest and transparent about that, right? Because that's a conflict. That's a cognitive dissonance that shouldn't be allowed to exist, in my opinion.
Well, and
that's no opinion on right or wrong on Israel's part or anything like that.
Right.
It's just
But that's-
consistency.
Like most things start at first as values and then become political values by like a form of osmosis, right? It's like a blood-brain barrier transfer, right? There's like a value that they have that's pro-Israel or pro-Palestinian plight, right? And those like values come first, and then secondarily to that are every fiscal value for all these folks.
For sure.
So I think for folks like Mike Lee, who I have a ton of respect for, like he's negotiating between these two different values that are probably at stake. And some of it might be donor pressure, some of it might be media pressure. I mean, God, and Western media just doesn't seem interested in the story, no matter how important it is in the global scene. And no matter how much of the real tragedy, no matter how much not knowing about it inhibits you from understanding anything in the Middle East at all.
Yeah.
Like you don't know why the Houthis are attacking us right now if you don't know about Israel Palestine or about the war crimes trial or about any of these things.
Yeah.
Well, and the Overton window, at least within the right, is shifting now because of people like Vivek or Tucker Carlson, where they are taking a little bit more of a America First approach, as you were just describing it, where there is becoming this like even Tucker will be like, I don't really have a dog in this fight of the Israel. Like it sucks what's going on over there, but America's falling apart, and that's becoming the narrative right now. So you are starting to see that creep in, but it's going to be much more the young folks of the GOP that are going to kind of start to have that banner, where I think the boomers listening to talk radio types like Mark Levin or those types, they're still going to be captured in this area of Israel good no matter what, Benjamin Netanyahu's like the second coming of Jesus kind of thing, right?
Right.
Like obviously the Bible says that the Likud party is the rightful heir to Israel, right? Like that is kind of where they are right now, right?
Yeah, I don't think that's a totally unfair way to think about it. A lot of people have very narrow vision here on this, and they're not really interested in a wider one, or trying to just even be accurate.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy.
Wild.
So anyways, there's foreign policy. Oh yeah, one more thing. We were completely right about Gonzalo
Lira. Yeah, he was the journalist in Ukraine that he had a big Twitter thread back last summer.
Yeah, which we covered.
Yeah, we covered it. And he died in prison.
American producer, American videographer, who went to Ukraine some time ago because he had a romantic relationship with a woman there, became his wife, and then he was also a dating coach at one point. And it's strange that so many outlets reporting his death mentioned that.
I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, apparently.
Not journalist, but dating coach. Okay.
Well, and then Putin propagandists would often come after that, right?
This puppet of Putin.
And I'm not sure. I've watched some of his stuff when we were covering it last time, and I never found Putin apologism. What I found was him explaining the incentives that the West established for Russia to prevent NATO from coming into Ukraine. So, yeah. And then David Sachs tweeted about it this week. He said, Gonzalo
Lira, if I'm arrested, I will die in a Ukrainian prison. Help me. Like he's saying that Gonzalo said that. Then Gonzalo gets arrested. He dies in a Ukrainian prison. And then all the pro-Ukraine accounts are saying he died from smoking 40 cigarettes a day. So
yeah, obviously not a generous or fair take at all. This also doesn't mention what we mentioned before, which was he was imprisoned initially for speaking ill of Zelensky and the Ukrainian regime, and was tortured in prison by his own account, saying that he had inmates who had ostensibly been sort of put up to this by the regime there, like scratching the white of his eye with a toothpick, and saying to him, like, can you still read books if you can't see, or if we take your eyes out, basically, like really heinous stuff. He gets out of prison, right? And the story is he is trying to get out of the country, and he's putting videos on Twitter, right? Like, I'm going to go to the border. I'm going to try to get out. If they detain me, then I will go to prison and I will die. And so here I go, basically.
Yeah,
and
his whole Twitter thread is him laying out the exact plan of getting out of the country, and,
right.
and it basically saying, if you don't hear from me again, you know what happened.
And the saddest thing about it is that we didn't hear from him again until this last week when it came out that he had been killed or had died in prison.
So the real tragedy here is you have an American journalist, Alusu Krushmanov.
It doesn't sound very American.
Kurmasheva, who is a Wall Street Journal, I think, contractor, who is imprisoned in Russia. And we've rightly said, hey, this is a huge deal, and the State Department's trying to get him free. We've said that if anyone tries to transport something through the Red Sea, we're going to send a battle carrier to defend them. Meanwhile, we're giving billions of dollars to a country to defend it, and we can't say, hey, also, could you guys like just give us that reporter who's an American citizen?
Yeah.
So like that's the crazy moment. And we're doing this, ironically, to defend democracy while the democracy is killing Americans in the prisons.
Shibboleth. Democracy isn't real.
It's a magical word.
It's a magical word. And obviously we have a lot of problems to solve internationally with regard to how other countries are treating our people. And we do a lot more for a basketball player imprisoned for bringing a weed cartridge to Russia than we do for a journalist speaking ill of America's ally, Ukraine. So really sad story. And obviously, our thoughts go out to his family. And, there should be some kind of justice for this, but I don't have a lot of hope for that.